lot of the businesses that fail, they fail as a result of the inability to adapt to the changing conditions. And think about all the conditions that impact any business. Right now, all the talk around the economy and inflation and interest rates, recessions, or whatever other conditions you can throw at this from an economic standpoint, leadership conditions will change. And oftentimes we know that the people who start the journey with us don't always finish. I was in a conversation just this week with someone who's got a very big job with a global bank, and they've had 4 changes in the CEO seat over the last 3 years. That has an impact. She's had to adjust. Personal conditions. Got to be able to adapt. Not feeling it today. I feel like I might want to mail it in. Right? So we bring personal things to the table that sometimes we have to adapt to. In the last 4 years, we've had to adapt to some of the geographic conditions that we've experienced. Leadership at a distance now. I can't always just walk up the hall to see, the head of marketing, or the team that I work with might be spread throughout the country because we've moved to sort of a virtual world today. So we've all had to adapt to that. And then you have other external forces, public influence, opinions. There are all kinds of situations that come up where we are forced, if we're going to be high performing, to make adjustments. Some of them are minor and some of them are big ones. Sometimes big ideas come up and we think we're going east and now we're going west. So that adaptability, great teams are always able to adapt. And so I tell the story to almost every group that I work with about the Taoist farmer. And it's kind of a long story, but you'll get the point of this as I go through this story, which is it's how you react that matters, right? So changing conditions. So here's this farmer in ancient China who owned a horse. His neighbor says to him, "Man, you are so lucky to have a horse to pull the cart for you." And the farmer replies with, "Maybe." Hey, but one day he didn't latch the gate. The horse ran away. "Oh no, that's terrible news," his neighbor cried. "Such bad luck." And the farmer replied with, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, bringing with it 6 wild horses. "And how fantastic. You're so lucky," his neighbor told him. "Maybe," the farmer replied. So in these changing situations, how we react, the attitude that we bring to the table matters. Because when things that we know, when we interpret a situation as an opportunity or a disaster, it shapes the way we respond. And we don't always know how the situation is going to turn out. There's no intrinsic opportunities or threats. There's only what happens and how we choose to respond. Do you ever talk to anybody who's constantly on the disaster side of things? "Oh no, this didn't go according to plan." And so it never does. So I bring this story to the table for everyone because it really speaks to the second characteristic of high-performing teams, which is attitude. And the only attitude that high-performance teams bring to the table is whatever it takes. There's no alternative. It's about going above and beyond, whatever it takes. Well, I might have to work overtime. Yep, that's what it takes. So there's sort of 7 keys to helping organizations really get their arms around attitude. And the first one is no victims. We have to really talk about disowning our helplessness. I don't know what to do. Woe is me. And as I mentioned here in the slide, you've got one of 2 things at the end of the day. You either have excuses or you have results. There's no in between. And it usually starts with, well, how come we didn't hit that goal or we didn't get the desired outcome that we wanted? If it starts with well, if the answer starts with the word well, I can tell exactly where the conversation is going. I know what's coming, right? So we have to help people disown that helplessness. There are no victims. And then the second piece here is that, taking the bull by the horns, meaning there are times where you just have to take action. Have you ever spent time in a room with someone who's getting ready to get ready and there's really no action on the backside of it? High performance teams have people who are willing to take the bull by the horns, take the first step, move towards something instead of just talking about it. As Teddy Roosevelt famously said, when I make up my mind to do a thing, I act. That's what he's talking about. Even if we don't know how that first step is going to turn out, we take action. And number three is you have to enter the no whine zone. There's no crying about it. We don't want, well, this person didn't do that. People, so sometimes there's finger pointing and, well, that's not my job, all that kind of stuff. There's no whining. And back to the Taoist farmer, you have to put attitude in charge of emotions. It's usually never as bad as you think, and it's likely not as good as you think either. You've got to put attitude in charge of those emotions. Sometimes, especially in working with leaders who might, depending on their personality style, have that sort of knee-jerk reaction to things. Helping them throttle back and understand that their attitude and their reactions really do matter. And recognizing that there are times where it will not work out as planned, and being accepting of those outcomes. Oftentimes when it doesn't work out as planned, guess where it takes us? Somewhere better than we had planned. And high performance teams celebrate small victories daily. Think about what's going on with, teams who are practicing for their sport. I mean, even in practice, when they do something well, people cheer. But in business, it's really easy to overlook some of those small victories that all of us have, no matter what seat we sit in. The janitor has small victories every day. It's just a matter of, do we recognize and do we celebrate those? The other thing about attitude is, as I listed here, put on a new pair of shoes. Can you put yourself in the other person's shoes? Do you understand what they're bringing to the table? And then number 5 on here talks about organizations with great attitudes exude energy and enthusiasm. Have you ever walked to an office? And I used to do this in one of my previous roles. You could walk to an office, doors are closed, heads are down, there's sort of a morgue vibe in the place. And then you'd walk into other offices where maybe there was some music on, like the greeting at the door was something else, and it was like a whole different energy. But that energy and enthusiasm is contagious. If the leadership is excited, that cascades throughout the organization. If the leadership has great energy, the rest of the organization has great energy. So those 2 keys right there are something that are really easy to kind of pick up on. You can tell if people are having fun in an organization or if it is a grind to show up every day. And then great organizations have attitudes that are built around exceeding expectations. Not just the expectations of others, but your own expectations. If you have a culture where people are personally invested in the outcome and they want to exceed their own expectations, great things get delivered. Because it's organizations who are never satisfied that stand out head and shoulders amongst the rest. You know, when an organization might win the Super Bowl or they hit their corporate goals, the high performance organizations, you know what they start to focus on? The next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. There's the concept of enough doesn't exist. And then you start to think about, what is our benchmark? Some companies will benchmark themselves against last year's performance. Hey, we grew by 10% last year. Great. High performance organizations benchmark themselves against what they're capable of accomplishing. Did I personally grow this year? Did I click on all cylinders for which that I could? Did I go all the way to the end? So knowing what those full capabilities are, that's a key. Because it's easy to benchmark against last year or against the market or against whatever you want. But benchmarking against what you're fully capable of achieving or what you believe you're fully capable of achieving, that's where the great stuff lives. And so there's this concept of Kaizen, right? Which stands, it's Japanese, and it's a concept around continual improvement. And it's a concept, when you really dig into it, that if you sort of buy into this idea that we're all trying to continually improve, you might get it tattooed on yourself like I did. Okay. But improvement, success, when they say, well, I want to be successful. Success asks, what am I getting? But improvement asks, what am I becoming? Two different, what am I getting versus what am I becoming? It's about the personal performance here. If I hit the corporate goal, I get a bonus. Congratulations. But improvement asks, what did I become along the way? Did I become a better leader along the way? That's Kaizen. That's the idea here of all of us continuing to try and improve our performance. So have that attitude of continual improvement. That's a key characteristic for high performance teams. We can always get just a little bit better. And in doing so, we have to make sure we understand the difference between good intentions and being intentional. A lot of us have good intentions. Trying is filled with good intentions. Doing is a result of being intentional. When people are unintentional, it's consistent with always having an excuse, but being intentional is always having an idea. And you can hear it in people's conversations. Words of good intention sound like I wish, someday, hopefully. Hope is one of the most addictive drugs out there. We call it hopium. A lot of people living on hopium out there. Versus those words of intentional living, which sounds like, today I make a decision and this is what we're going to do. I will quit smoking today, right? I'll quit smoking next year. That sounds like a good intention. Being intentional is I'm doing it right now. So helping our teams understand the difference between, we all come at things usually with good intentions, but we have to be very intentional. We have to behave intentionally to actually get the outcomes that we want. Because the last A that I'll talk about is accountability. And what does it mean to be accountable? And if you look at the definition here, it's kind of interesting. It's the acceptance. It's the acceptance, good or bad, of our personal actions. What did I do that contributed to attaining or failing to meet an intended goal? Accountability is very personal. which makes it the most difficult, by the way. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. But think about all the people that we're accountable to. First and foremost, always, we are accountable to ourselves, our own personal performance, how we prepare for meetings, our plan for our own personal growth. What are you doing? Studying, reading, courses you're taking, people you're talking to, coaches you're hiring to plan for your own personal growth. We're accountable to ourselves based on our tolerance levels. What are we willing to accept? As leaders, what are we willing to accept from the people around us? What are we willing to accept from, the people at the leadership table? What am I willing to accept from the janitor in the organization? And we're accountable for our circumstances and what we're willing to do. Back to that attitude. Is it whatever it takes? Am I willing to do whatever it takes? Am I willing to sacrifice? Some people are not. Some people are not willing to sacrifice. We're accountable to our family, our personal relationships, those direct reports, and our colleagues. So there's accountability. We're accountable to a lot of folks. But accountability only works for those individuals who want to improve. If you have people around you who don't care to improve, accountability will not work. Accountability will be seen as a negative. It's why the human resource departments have performance improvement plans, the old PIP plans, right? It's to hold people accountable, usually so we can get rid of them. Because we've identified that these people are not willing, they don't fit for whatever reason, and they don't wish to improve. So we put them into something that we know they won't want to do. But performance improvement plans can be really useful too. It's why people hire coaches and trainers and dietitians. Guess what those are? I have a personal trainer. You know what that is? That's my performance improvement plan. I show up, she tells me what I'm doing and how to do it better. Because I want to get better. But for those who don't seek improvement, they don't want accountability. This is the status quo group. They're happy just toiling around their day, not getting anywhere. If something happens, we're not moving closer to our goals, no big deal. Status quo. That group does not want accountability. So depending on the people you have around you, accountability is only for those who want to get better with you. And then you think about accountability versus responsibility. Responsibility is more about having an obligation. It's an obligation to complete a task or oversee the output of others that you are directly in charge of. That's responsibility. It's different than accountability. How do I start to create accountability? You start with telling others. Say it out loud. When you tell somebody that you're going to lose 10 pounds, guess what happens? People start to pay attention. If you tell somebody we're going to grow this organization by 20% next year, you say it out loud, guess what? People start paying attention. You just created that accountability. But you find an accountability partner. And by the way, CEOs and C-suiters, they're great at holding each other accountable, even if they're not inside the same organizations. It's one of my favorite things. There might be peers, there could be teammates. Hire a coach. That's what we're here for, right? To help hold people accountable. And so the 3 A's, attitude, adaptability, and accountability, all characteristics that you can create inside of your organization to make sure it is a high-performing group.